The fluorescent lights of the high school gymnasium buzzed overhead as Bryce Thompson stood in the center of the reunion crowd, his heart pounding like a drum. When he finally said the words, "Anthony is my partner," to his old classmates, the silence that followed hit him like a slap. And just like that, the friends he'd grown up with turned their backs, leaving him isolated in a room full of memories. Streamers in the school colors hung limp from the rafters, and the faint smell of cafeteria pizza still lingered even though the caterers had packed up hours ago. Bryce felt every eye in the place flick toward him, then away, as if he had suddenly become invisible yet impossible to ignore. It had all started so innocently that morning. Bryce had driven 3 hours from New York City back to his hometown in Ohio for the 10-year class reunion, hoping to reconnect with the people who had shaped his early years. He brought Anthony along, his boyfriend of 2 years, thinking it was finally time to stop hiding. Anthony, with his warm smile and steady presence, had encouraged him the whole way. "It's your life, Bryce. They either accept you or they don't," he had said in the car, one hand resting lightly on Bryce's knee as the Ohio countryside rolled past. Bryce had nodded, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, telling himself he was ready. But as they walked into the gym decorated with old yearbook photos and a big banner that read Class of 2014, still standing, Bryce felt the weight of expectations pressing down like a physical force. His parents were there too, chatting with other families near the punch bowl, still holding on to the dream that their only son would settle down with a nice girl and give them grandchildren. They didn't know about Anthony yet, or at least that's what Bryce told himself every time the topic of dating came up during holiday calls. The night unfolded with laughter and stories, old inside jokes resurfacing as if time had stood still. Jake, his best buddy from high school, clapped him on the back and asked, "So, Bryce, when are you going to introduce us to your special someone?" The grin on Jake's face was so genuine, so full of the easy camaraderie they had shared on the football field and at late-night bonfires, that Bryce almost lost his nerve. He took a deep breath, his hand finding Anthony's beside him. "Guys, this is Anthony. He's my partner." The smiles froze in place. Jake's face twisted first in confusion, then disbelief. "Wait, what? You're joking, right?" One of the girls Bryce had once taken to prom let out a nervous laugh that died quickly. The group exchanged looks, and one by one they mumbled excuses about needing more drinks or checking on old teachers, and walked away. Jake lingered for a second longer, eyes searching Bryce's face as if looking for the kid he used to know. "Man, I thought I knew you. This isn't the Bryce I grew up with." Then he turned too, shoulders stiff, disappearing into the crowd. Bryce's parents overheard and approached, their faces pale under the harsh gym lights. His father's voice was low but sharp. "Son, what is this?" His mother's hand fluttered to her throat, the same gesture she made when she was trying not to cry. The rejection stung deeper than any physical blow. Flashbacks flooded Bryce's mind. High school days when he suppressed his feelings, dating girls to fit in, feeling empty inside, while everyone around him seemed so sure of who they were. He had met Anthony in a little coffee shop in Brooklyn during his first year in the city, a chance encounter over spilled espresso that blossomed into something real, something that made him feel seen for the first time in his life. Now, standing there, the crowd seemed to part around him like he was contagious. Anthony squeezed his hand gently. "Let's go," he whispered, voice steady even though Bryce could feel the tension in his grip. But Bryce couldn't move at first, the shock rooting him in place. This was the moment he had feared for years, the denial from the very people he thought would support him no matter what. As they finally left the gym, the cool night air hitting his face like a wake-up call, Bryce realized something had shifted inside him. He wasn't going back to pretending anymore. The drive to the hotel was quiet at first, headlights cutting through the dark Ohio roads. Anthony tried to comfort him with soft words, but Bryce's mind was racing with the consequences. What would this mean for his family relationships? His job was safe in the city, but the small-town gossip would spread like wildfire by morning. By the time they reached the hotel, Bryce was exhausted, but a new determination was forming beneath the hurt. He had been denied, but in that denial, he found the courage to choose himself. Anthony ordered room service, and they sat on the edge of the bed, the television flickering silently in the background. "You were brave tonight," Anthony said, brushing a strand of hair from Bryce's forehead. Bryce nodded, but inside he wondered how much more bravery he would need in the days ahead. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from his mother. "We need to talk. Please call us." He stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then set it down. For the first time, he wasn't going to apologize for who he was. The night stretched on, filled with quiet conversations about their life in New York, the apartment they shared, the friends who already knew and loved them both. Yet the sting of the reunion lingered, a sharp reminder that the world outside their bubble wasn't ready to celebrate. Bryce lay awake long after Anthony had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the boy he had been at 17, terrified to admit even to himself that the way he looked at other guys wasn't just admiration. He thought about the nights he spent journaling in secret, tearing out pages so no one would find them. And he thought about the man he had become, successful, independent, loved. Tonight had cracked something open, and he wasn't sure yet if the pieces would fit back together the same way. But one thing was clear. He couldn't keep living half a life just to make other people comfortable. The clock ticked past midnight, marking the end of the reunion and the beginning of something new. Bryce closed his eyes, the decision settling in his chest like a quiet promise. Tomorrow he would face whatever came next, but he would face it as himself, fully, finally, without apology. The next morning the Ohio sky was gray and heavy, matching the weight Bryce still carried from the night before. They checked out of the hotel early, Anthony loading their bags into the trunk while Bryce sat in the passenger seat, phone in hand, rereading the text from his mother. "We need to talk." 3 simple words that felt like a verdict. Anthony slid behind the wheel and started the engine. "You don't have to answer right away," he said gently. "Give yourself time." Bryce nodded, but the silence between them felt different now, charged with everything left unsaid at the reunion. The drive back toward New York stretched long and quiet at first. Fields gave way to highways, and Bryce watched the landscape blur past, mind replaying every turn back, every awkward glance. Anthony kept the radio low, some soft indie playlist they both liked, but neither of them sang along like they usually did on road trips. Eventually, Anthony broke the quiet. "I'm proud of you, you know." "That took guts." Bryce turned to look at him, seeing the sincerity in those dark eyes, but also a flicker of something else. Hurt, maybe, or uncertainty. "Yeah," Bryce asked, voice rough. "Because it feels like I just blew up my entire past in one sentence." Anthony reached over and squeezed his hand. "Your past doesn't own you. We do. You and me, right here." But the words didn't settle the unease in Bryce's chest. By the time they crossed into Pennsylvania, the argument they had both been avoiding finally surfaced. Anthony pulled into a rest stop so they could talk without the distraction of the road. "Look, I get that last night was brutal," he said, leaning against the car hood, arms crossed. "But you've been pulling away since we left the gym. Like you're ashamed I was there." Bryce's stomach twisted. "That's not it. I'm not ashamed of you. I'm ashamed of how they made me feel, like I'm some stranger now." Anthony shook his head. "Then why didn't you defend us more? You just stood there while Jake walked away like I didn't exist." The words landed hard, and Bryce felt the misunderstanding bloom between them like a crack in concrete. He wanted to explain that the shock had frozen him, that years of conditioning had made him second-guess every word, but instead he snapped, "Because I was trying to process the fact that my best friend since kindergarten just erased me. Sorry if I didn't have the perfect comeback ready." They stood there in the parking lot, trucks rumbling past, tension thick in the air. Anthony looked away first, jaw tight. "I love you, Bryce. But I won't be your secret anymore. Not after last night." The drive resumed in heavier silence. Bryce stared out the window, replaying the conversation, hating how his own fear had hurt the one person who had never asked him to be anything but himself. When they finally reached their apartment in Brooklyn late that evening, the city lights felt both welcoming and overwhelming. Bryce dropped his bag by the door and collapsed onto the couch. Anthony disappeared into the kitchen, the clink of glasses the only sound. A few minutes later he returned with 2 beers. "Truce," he offered, handing one over. Bryce took it, their fingers brushing. "Truce," he agreed softly. But the phone call started the next day. His mother left a voicemail, voice trembling. "Your father and I are worried." "This isn't you, Bryce." Come home, and we'll figure it out. His sister texted from Chicago, asking if it was true what the family group chat was saying. Even Jake sent a message, short and sharp. Dude, call me when you're ready to talk like a man. Bryce read them all, chest tight, then turned his phone to silent. At work the following Monday, his boss noticed he was distracted during the team meeting. Everything okay, Thompson? Bryce forced a smile. Just family stuff. The lie tasted bitter now. He had always kept his personal life separate at the design firm, but suddenly the secrecy felt like another cage. That evening Anthony came home from his shift at the bookstore with takeout Thai food and a new determination. I booked us a weekend in the Catskills next month, he announced, setting the bags on the counter. Just us. No phones, no drama. Bryce looked up from his laptop, grateful for the olive branch, but the distance from the reunion still lingered. They ate in relative peace, talking about work and weekend plans, yet Bryce could feel the undercurrent. Later, as they lay in bed, Anthony's arm around him, Bryce whispered into the dark, I'm sorry for how I handled the drive. You didn't deserve that. Anthony kissed his temple. We'll figure it out. Together. But sleep didn't come easy for Bryce. He kept seeing Jake's face, hearing his father's sharp tone, wondering how many more bridges he would have to cross, or burn, before the world stopped trying to pull him back into the closet. The week dragged on with more texts, more missed calls. His mother sent an article about choosing the right path, and Bryce deleted it without reading. Anthony noticed the tension and suggested they go for a walk along the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. The city hummed around them, couples laughing, joggers passing, the Statue of Liberty faint in the distance. This is our life now, Anthony said, stopping to lean on the railing. Not Ohio. Not the past. Here. Bryce nodded, leaning into him, the wind whipping his hair. For the first time since the reunion, he felt a spark of hope. But deep down he knew the real test was only beginning. The misunderstandings with Anthony were just the start. The bigger storms, family expectations, old friendships fracturing, and the pressure of a world that still whispered he was wrong, were gathering on the horizon. Bryce squeezed Anthony's hand tighter, silently promising himself he wouldn't let fear win again. The city lights reflected in the water below, bright and unapologetic, mirroring the choice he had already made. He was going to live his truth, no matter how many people turned away. Back in the rhythm of city life, Bryce threw himself into work, designing campaign graphics for a new client until his eyes burned. The distraction helped, but every notification on his phone still made his stomach drop. Anthony noticed the change and tried to pull him out of it with small gestures, surprise coffee runs, notes left on the fridge, quiet evenings watching old movies. Yet the misunderstanding from the drive home lingered like smoke. One Thursday evening, after a long day, Bryce came home to find Anthony sitting at the kitchen table with an open photo album. What's this? Bryce asked, dropping his keys. Anthony looked up, expression guarded. Found it while cleaning. You and that girl from high school, what was her name? Sarah? Looks pretty cozy. Bryce's blood ran cold. He had forgotten about the album, stuffed in a box from his move years ago. The photos showed him at prom, arm around Sarah, both smiling for the camera. It had been the last time he tried to convince himself he could be normal. It was before I figured things out, Bryce said quickly, sitting down across from him. I was still lying to everyone, including myself. Anthony closed the album slowly. I get that. But seeing it makes me wonder if part of you still wishes things were simpler. Like back then. The words cut deeper than Bryce expected. That's not fair. I chose you. I chose us at the reunion. Anthony stood, pacing. Did you? Or did you just finally get tired of hiding? Because sometimes it feels like you're still performing. For your family, for me, for everyone. The argument escalated, voices rising in the small apartment. Bryce felt the old panic rising, the fear that his past would always be used against him. You think I want to go back to that life? Pretending every day? I left Ohio for a reason. Anthony stopped pacing. Then why do you still answer their calls? Why do you read every text like it's a lifeline? The question hung heavy. Bryce had no answer, only the sinking feeling that Anthony was right. He was still tethered, still hoping for approval he might never get. The next morning Bryce woke to an empty bed. Anthony had left early for a shift, leaving a note. Need space to think. Talk tonight. Alone in the apartment, Bryce stared at the ceiling, replaying every word. The secret from his past, the engagement ring he had bought Sarah before calling it off at 19, felt exposed now, even though he had never told Anthony the full story. He had returned the ring, told everyone it was mutual, and buried the memory. But now it was out, twisted into doubt. Work felt impossible that day. His boss pulled him aside after a missed deadline. Whatever's going on personally, leave it at the door. Clients don't care. Bryce nodded, throat tight, and spent the afternoon fixing designs he had rushed the day before. That evening Anthony came home quieter than usual. They sat on the couch, the city noise filtering through the open window. "I'm sorry for how I said it," Anthony began. "But I need to know you're all in. No more half measures." Bryce took his hand. "I am all in. That album is just paper. You're my future." They talked late into the night, peeling back layers. Bryce sharing the shame he had carried for years, Anthony admitting his own fears of being a placeholder. The conversation healed some of the rift, but Bryce knew the crack was still there, waiting for the next pressure point. Meanwhile, the family texts kept coming. His sister called from Chicago, voice careful. "Mom's really upset. Dad won't even say your name. Maybe come home for a weekend? Just to talk." Bryce declined, citing work, but the guilt gnawed at him. The turning point arrived unexpectedly on Friday. Bryce received an email from his old high school, an invitation to speak at Career Day the following month. The principal had heard he was doing big things in graphic design. Bryce stared at the screen, the irony sharp. Go back to the same hallways where he had hidden, now as an openly gay man. He almost deleted it, but something stopped him. Maybe this was the chance to face the past on his own terms. He forwarded the email to Anthony with a simple note. "What do you think?" Anthony replied instantly, "Go. Show them who you really are." The support meant everything, yet Bryce felt the weight of the decision. That night they cooked dinner together, the kitchen filled with laughter for the first time in days. But as they ate, Bryce's phone buzzed again. Jake this time, a longer message. "Heard you're coming back for Career Day. We should grab a beer. Clear the air." Bryce showed Anthony the text. "Think I should." Anthony shrugged, but his eyes were cautious. "Only if you want to. Just don't go alone if it feels wrong." Bryce lay awake that night, mind racing. The misunderstanding with Anthony had forced him to confront how much he still carried from Ohio. The secret of his past relationship with Sarah wasn't just old news. It was a symbol of the lies he had told to survive. Revealing it had nearly cost him the one person who saw him clearly. Now, with the Career Day invitation and Jake's olive branch, Bryce sensed the next chapter approaching. He would return to his hometown not as the boy who ran away, but as the man who refused to hide anymore. The decision brought a strange peace. Whatever happened, more rejection, more arguments, or maybe even healing, he would meet it head-on. Anthony stirred beside him, murmuring in his sleep, and Bryce pulled him closer. For the first time in weeks, the future felt possible, even if the road there was still paved with uncertainty. The misunderstanding had hurt, but it had also clarified what mattered most, choosing truth over comfort every single time. The drive back to Ohio for Career Day felt shorter this time, or maybe Bryce was just numb to the distance. Anthony had offered to come, but Bryce insisted on going alone. "I need to do this part myself," he had said at the airport drop-off, kissing him goodbye. Now, pulling into the same high school parking lot 2 weeks later, Bryce gripped the steering wheel, the familiar brick building looming like a challenge. Students milled about, backpacks slung over shoulders, oblivious to the storm inside him. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, crisp button-down, no tie, the small rainbow pin on his lapel that Anthony had given him as a quiet show of support. "You've got this," he whispered to himself, then stepped out. The auditorium was packed with teenagers and a few teachers. Bryce spoke about his journey from small-town Ohio to New York design firms, carefully weaving in his identity without apology. "I spent years trying to fit a mold that wasn't mine," he told them, voice steady. "The day I stopped pretending was the day I started living." A few kids nodded, others shifted uncomfortably. Afterward, teachers shook his hand, some genuine, some polite. But in the hallway, Jake waited, hands in his pockets. "That was something," he said. They walked to the football field, the same bleachers where they had once shared secrets as kids. Jake kicked at the grass. I was an ass at the reunion. It caught me off guard. My wife's family is real traditional. I didn't know how to handle it. Bryce listened, the old friendship cracking open again. They talked for an hour about marriages, careers, regrets. Jake even apologized. You're still my friend, man. Just give me time to get used to it. The conversation felt like a small victory, but Bryce knew better than to trust it fully. That evening at his parents' house, the Real test waited. His mother had insisted on dinner. The table was set with the good china, but the air was thick. His father barely looked at him. So you're back speaking at the school now, he said finally, cutting into his steak. Making a statement, I guess. Bryce set down his fork. It's not a statement, Dad. It's my life. His mother tried to mediate, voice soft. We just want you happy. This path, it's hard. People talk. The pressure mounted with every sentence. Expectations of marriage, grandchildren, Sunday church like before. Bryce felt the old weight, but this time he pushed back. I am happy. With Anthony. And if that's too hard for you, I understand. But I won't change who I am to make it easier. The dinner ended in strained silence. His father left the table early. Outside on the porch, his mother hugged him tightly. We love you. We just need time. Bryce drove to the hotel feeling drained but lighter. The betrayal came the next morning. Jake texted, Hey, some guys from the old crew saw your talk online. Someone recorded it. It's everywhere now. Bryce opened the link. A shaky video of his speech posted on the town Facebook group. Comments pouring in, some supportive, many not. His boss in New York called an hour later. Clients saw the clip. They're asking questions. We need to talk when you're back. The professional fallout hit hard. Bryce had sacrificed the safety of silence, and now his career hung in the balance. He called Anthony that afternoon, voice cracking for the first time. Everything's blowing up here. Anthony listened, then said the words Bryce needed. Come home. We'll handle it together. But Bryce made a different choice, a sacrifice. I need one more day. I have to finish this. He spent the afternoon walking the town, visiting old spots, facing the whispers at the local diner. By evening, he sat in his rental car outside his parents' house, watching the lights inside. The betrayal from the leaked video stung, but it also clarified his resolve. He wouldn't run. He texted Jake, Thanks for the heads up. I'm not hiding anymore. Then he drove away, heading toward the airport at dawn. The sacrifice, risking his job, straining his relationship by staying longer, weighed heavy, but it felt necessary. Anthony's understanding text came through. I'm here when you land. Proud of you. Bryce smiled despite everything. The road ahead was uncertain, but every step forward was his own. The turning point had arrived. He was no longer reacting to the world's rejection. He was shaping his own story, consequences and all. The flight back to New York was turbulent, mirroring the storm in Bryce's mind. He landed exhausted, Anthony waiting at baggage claim with open arms. They drove home in silence at first. Then the words poured out. The dinner confrontation, the leaked video, the call from his boss. Anthony listened without interruption, then pulled over on the Brooklyn Bridge approach. You don't have to carry this alone, he said. We fight together now. That night they lay awake planning next steps. Bryce would meet his boss, explain, and if necessary, look for new opportunities. The support steadied him, but the emotional toll was mounting. The climax hit 3 days later. Bryce's father suffered a heart attack back in Ohio. His mother called at 2 a.m., voice breaking. He's asking for you. Bryce booked the first flight out, Anthony insisting on coming this time. No arguments. They arrived at the hospital by midday. His father lay pale in the bed, monitors beeping. The room felt smaller than the reunion gym. His mother hugged them both, no questions asked. When his father woke, eyes meeting Bryce's, the words came haltingly. I was wrong, son. Seeing that video, hearing you speak, I realized I almost lost you before I ever really knew you. Tears welled. Bryce sat by the bed, holding his father's hand for the first time in years. I'm still me, Dad. Just the full version. His father nodded weakly. Bring Anthony by the house when I'm out. I want to meet him properly. The emotional breakthrough cracked open years of distance. But the day wasn't over. Jake showed up at the hospital, flowers in hand. Heard about your dad. Also heard I messed up leaking that video indirectly. I'm sorry. The apology felt genuine this time. They talked in the hallway. Old hurts aired, new understanding built. Anthony stood quietly supportive, and for the first time Bryce felt the fractures beginning to heal. That evening at his parents' house, his mother made coffee and they sat around the kitchen table. His father, discharged with strict orders, looked at Anthony across the table. "You make my son happy." Anthony met his gaze. Every day, the simple exchange carried more weight than any grand speech. Bryce watched, chest full, realizing the turning point had been not the reunion, not the speech, but this moment of raw honesty. Yet the cost had been high. His job in New York was now on thin ice. The client meeting loomed next week. Bryce had sacrificed stability for truth. Back in the hospital the next morning, his father squeezed his shoulder. "Don't give up on your dreams for us. We'll be okay." The words freed something in Bryce. He and Anthony flew home that night, the plane quiet, hands linked. The misunderstanding, the betrayal, the family pressure, all of it had led here, to a place where love and acceptance were no longer theoretical. Bryce leaned his head on Anthony's shoulder. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Anthony smiled. "Never." The climax had passed, but the growth was just beginning. Bryce knew he would face more challenges, workplace fallout, lingering town gossip, but he would face them whole. The man who had been rejected at the reunion was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned that truth wasn't a destination but a daily choice. Weeks blurred into months. Bryce's boss called him in after the client meeting and, to his surprise, offered a promotion instead of termination. "Your authenticity is what makes your work stand out," she said. "We want more of that." The validation felt surreal. At home, Anthony celebrated with a quiet dinner on their tiny balcony overlooking the city. "See? The world catches up eventually." Bryce laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months. They talked about the future, maybe adopting one day, traveling, building a life without secrets. The friendship with Jake slowly mended through texts and one video call where Jake admitted, "My kids asked about you. I told them you're the bravest guy I know." Small steps, but real. Back in Ohio, Bryce's parents visited New York for the first time in years. His father toured the design studio, asking questions about Bryce's projects. His mother hugged Anthony tightly at the airport goodbye. "Take care of each other," she whispered. The acceptance wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, old habits dying hard, but it was progress. Bryce felt the weight lift further with each honest conversation. The sacrifices had reshaped everything. His career stronger, his love deeper, his sense of self unshakable. He had faced misunderstanding with Anthony, betrayal from the leaked video, family pressure that nearly broke him, and the truth that forced him to choose himself every single day. Each decision carried consequences, but each one also built the man he was proud to be. One crisp autumn evening, Bryce and Anthony walked through Central Park, leaves crunching underfoot. Anthony stopped under a lamppost, pulling Bryce close. "Remember the reunion?" Bryce nodded. "Hard to forget." Anthony smiled. "I'm glad you chose us that night." They kissed softly, the city humming around them, a perfect moment of happiness earned through every trial. Bryce thought back to the boy who had hidden, the man who had been rejected, and the person he had become, someone who understood that love wasn't about perfection but persistence. The journey wasn't over, but the path forward felt clear and bright. True or false, embracing your authentic self always leads to greater happiness, even when it costs you relationships along the way.